This is Bill Hartzer, and this is the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast for July 14th, 2022. Lots of things to talk about this week. Let's go ahead and get started. So Google Search Console report. Backtrack stocks of ahrefs, and the URL is ahrefs.com/blog/GSC-hidden-terms-study. And his Google Search Console hidden terms study actually revealed that 50% of queries, search queries, are hidden on Google Search Console. So you're only actually seeing 50% of your search queries. They're essentially your organic search traffic. We were honestly under the impression, to be honest with you, I was under the impression that before this came out, that I was that when you looked at Google Search Console data, that it showed you really what the true picture was. And in fact, this is absolutely not the full picture whatsoever. And if you're only seeing about 50% of the search queries on your site when you actually go to Google Search Console, then that's just ridiculous. I mean, that data that's even worse than Google Analytics data. I mean, so it's just basically it's absolutely unreliable. So the bottom line is, don't trust the data that even Google Search Console gives you. It's not the full picture whatsoever. I can also tell you, based on my personal experience, that even Google Analytics data is estimated. And you can look and see in Google Help Docs that basically the way Google Analytics works is that they estimate the data, and then maybe a day or two later, they will actually update the data with the what they think is actual data. There's so many filters going on, though, in my opinion, that Google has to filter out the traffic, that it's not even correct data. So Google Analytics data and Google Search Console data. Now, though, we know also that Google Analytics data is estimated. It will actually not hold up in court as being factual and being a factual representation of the actual visits to a website. Plain and simple, it will not hold up in court, and it can be challenged. Google Analytics data is not correct. It's not the only true data that we can get is the web server logs, the log files. Now, I am planning actually seeing this report that Google Search Console data is not correct. I actually know from basically my personal experience that the Google crawl activity is actually not correct whatsoever. And I can actually tell you basically that I have looked and analyzed website log files and comparing that data, which actually shows a visit from, let's say, Google Search a crawler from Google, and say they crawled 100 pages, for example. And we know that because of the log file, right? It comes down to it. You look at what Google Search Console tells you that they crawled 50 pages that day. Well, in fact, based on the log files, they actually crawled 150 pages. So that data does not line up whatsoever. So the data that they're telling you, oh, we crawled a certain number of pages in Google Search Console, that's actually not true. And I plan on revealing and showing and proving that in a future upcoming report that I'm going to be working on. But that because I think that's just as important as knowing that basically the Google Search Console data in Google Search Console, the queries, about 50% of them are hidden. And so meaning that the data that you're seeing is not the full picture. Now, moving on, the Google My Business app was no longer available as of right now. As of, I guess, a few days ago or yesterday or whatever, but right now it's no longer available. You can't use it, delete it. It's just taking up space on your phone. Google, for several years, wanted us to use the Google My Business app on our phones to update and to respond to messages and basically make updates on our Google listing, our Google, local listings for our company. But now Google's completely removed that app. They're now telling us that we need to manage our Google business profile in the Google Maps app. So the Google My Business app should be deleted. You should be using the Google Maps app. And in fact, I know that there's actually more than one database, and so of that local data. And if you enter it in the Google Maps app and you make the changes there, it will be much better changing and faster, and the data will be updated faster, basically, if you enter it into the Google Maps app rather than going into Google search. But right now, our only options are to manage the Google business profile in the Google Maps app, which is most recommended, or in the Google search, or in Google search. Moving on. So will linking to HTTP pages impact rankings? So we know HTTPS is a search engine ranking factor. That's a given. Google's told us that, and how much of a factor, we don't know exactly. I don't think we'll ever know, but it is a ranking factor. So therefore, if we do make links, or we have links to our HTTP version of our site, will that be a negative? That's the real question, right? So we know HTTPS is a positive. Well, John Mueller this week actually came out and said there's nothing against linking to sites like that, meaning linking, nothing negative, nothing against linking as far as ranking factors go, or SEO, issues go, linking to HTTP. There's not really any, quoting John Mueller here, there's no kind of downside for your website to kind of like avoid linking to HTTP pages, because they're kind of old or crusty and not as cool as HTTPS. But Google's John Mueller has affirmed that it's okay for SEO reasons to link to another site using HTTP. Now, that brings up another question, is, are you linking properly, or are you redirecting properly from HTTP to the HTTPS version of your site? Keep in mind, you start with HTTP:// Hartzer.com. That should, the HTTP non-www should redirect to the final version. There shouldn't be an additional hop or two. You should not redirect from HTTP to HTTP www to HTTPS to HTTPS www. Now, that would be 4 different hops, or several different hops, right? Or through the redirects. However, we don't want that. We want as less hops as possible. So HTTP:// Hartzer.com should redirect directly to HTTPS www.hartzer.com, which is the final version that I'm using on Hartzer.com. Now, what you can do just to make sure everything is kind of working properly is go to hstspreload.org. HSTS preload check is HSTS preload is a list. That list is shared amongst all the major browsers. What happens is, if you get on that list, if your website is set up properly, your server, right, for HTTPS, and it's all set up properly, and you have the right redirects in place and everything like that, you will qualify to be on the HSTS preload list. That also means, in particular, that your site or your domain name is actually embedded into the browsers. Like it's embedded in that list is embedded into Google Chrome, into Safari, into Firefox, etc., and Microsoft Edge, etc. That means that if somebody requests to go to http hartzer.com, that the browser at the browser level, they know they will never request the HTTP version because you're on the list. Okay, so in order to qualify for the list, everything has to be set up properly. So you need to go to that hstspreload.org and check and make sure everything's set up properly, then submit to the site. Now, search engine land article. So search engine land this week was going through there, not a lot of noteworthy stuff as far as SEO goes, as far as I'm concerned. But there is a recent article by someone named John Clark, who has written an article, which is actually very helpful. It's on how to do a schema markup audit, okay, on your site. How to do a schema markup audit. So obviously, if you're not using schema, you're not using any schema markup on your site, and actually you may be using a little bit limited if you're using something like the Yoast plugin or an SEO plugin. They tend to do some limited schema. However, if you are not purposely doing additional schema markup code, you're completely missing out. I mean, it is basically at this point, my opinion is every SEO, all SEOs should be familiar with schema markup, when to use it, how to use it. There's absolutely no reason why you should not be using, if you're an SEO agency, shame on you if you are not marking up your clients' websites with schema and doing it properly, because it's one of those things that is fairly easy to do. Okay, it's kind of, at this point, it's fairly easy. And there's actually tools out there like inlinks.net that actually help you do that. So I'm mentioning inlinks.net because I was one of the original beta testers and originally on my site. And so even before it was released to the public, I'm a big fan of what they're doing. It's great for internal links, so it will actually automatically create internal links on your website. You can obviously control those once they're automated. You can control them a little bit, but it also creates schema markup code, the appropriate one. So if you, for example, if you have a FAQs, okay, or a question that's a heading on your site, it will actually mark it up with FAQ page schema, which is very helpful. I personally know of a site that was an e-commerce site. It was a large website, let's say 100,000 pages, 50,000 pages, whatever, large website. Now, we only added, because, we added inlinks.net because of the fact that there was no way to manually insert schema markup code on the site. The issue was this particular site, the content management system that was created did not allow for schema markup to be inserted. So the only way to do that, now you can add, that small markup, the small code for an inlinks. You can get that on the site, and then you go into inlinks and you tell it what pages to load to load. That was we had to use inlinks. There was no other way without a significant amount of web development that just was not going to be able to be done at that point. The customer, the client, the e-commerce site was just not going to be able to do it. So frankly, it just came down to the fact that we had to use inlinks. That site's organic traffic basically after a month or two, went up 60% just because Inlinks was being used and the schema was being added. So ideal situation, all schema markup code should be basically hand coded and custom for each page on the site. But if you're dealing with a site that's 50 pages or 100 pages or more, frankly, it's not going to be possible, right? If you are dedicated and you are dedicated SEO for that site, yes, you probably could do it and should do it. But in most cases, like an agency situation, where we're talking about a digital marketing agency, SEO agency, web design firm, whatever, and you have a client and you have a page, a site, your client site is 50 pages, even, or more, it's not cost effective for you to be manually putting in schema. So, or writing it for each page on the site and so forth. So something like Inlinks.net where we'll basically install it and then you configure it properly in their dashboard, then, then great, you can do that. Now, as a side note, I do offer an Inlinks.net setup. And I believe they also, if that's for large sites and if a lot of stuff needs to be done and set up, I believe Inlinks will help you do that if you pay a certain amount per month, but I'm not sure. You want to check with them. Again, Inlinks.net, highly recommended. So news.ycombinator.com, NEWSYCOMBINATOR.com. Any digital marketer, SEOs, basically my recommendation is you should be reading and keeping up with the latest news on Y Combinator. It's not an SEO site. It's a general tech newsworthy news and internet issues site. There are a fair amount of articles that make it on there that are, even are web development related, and that's fine, but there's enough really good internet and overall web internet and internet related articles and some non-internet related articles that make it on there that are absolutely worth to being aware of. So basically there's not a lot of SEO content on there. But like I said, if you have content that is newsworthy enough, if you write enough good technical content, you actually can get an article on the homepage. I've had at least a half a dozen or so posts over the years get on the homepage. It's absolutely great for your brand, absolutely great for traffic, and potentially links and notoriety on there if you can get something on there. But the content absolutely has to be stellar. You're not, can't be just SEO fluff or any kind of, anything like that. It's got to be really, really good groundbreaking content, right? So I'm moving on. So domain name issues, domain names. So I'm particularly proud of a case that is finally wrapping up today after more than a year that I've been working on this. So I can't tell you how many emails, how many contacts I've made, how much research I've done, how much how many times I've talked on the phone to domain registrars related to this. It's just absolutely one of these bizarre cases. It just is bizarre. I cannot describe it in any other way. I'm disappointed in the policies and how certain domain registrars have dealt with this situation, because you should be concerned of the policies that of certain domain registrars and how they've been dealt with this. I'm actually, since today, the domain is back in the actual hands of the owner of this domain name. So let's Tom. So this guy's name is Tom. He bought a domain that's worth over let's say $5,000, which, now he's paid essentially, he paid a lot more than 5,000, but let's just say, once you get into, a domain name value of 5,000 or more, it's pretty significant, right? Now, it doesn't matter whether it's a 10,000, $100,000, $1 million name, it's over 5,000. Okay, it's significant. So he paid for this domain name. It was a former tech company years ago, and that tech company was sold to another company. That company then was sold again and again, and the company that essentially acquired that original domain is now completely out of business, doesn't exist, and there's no trademark. So it's basically a brandable name. It's not like a generic name, but it's a brand. I would call it a brandable name, right? After all, it was the name 20 years ago of a tech company. So regardless, at this point, so Tom paid for the domain name. He bought it. He made that decision. He renewed the name until 2025. That is significant. That is a significant fact in this case, because he bought the name, right? And he renewed it, not just for a year or two, but there's no question, if you look at the Whois history, and that's available through different resources out there, third-party search, you can look and see that he registered this domain until 2025. That is factual. He did not want to lose his domain name. And being now that it's 2022, if you come across a domain that is renewed to 2025, you're probably not going to have access to that name, right? Unless you buy it specifically from Tom. Now, problem is his Gmail account, or the Gmail account, on this, on the Whois record of the domain, was hacked or accessed by a hacker. The Gmail account was hacked. From there, somehow the hacker realized that there's domain names associated. So that hacker then used the Gmail account to get access to the Uniregistry account. Now, Uniregistry is a registrar owned by GoDaddy. Now, the Uniregistry account was accessed, obviously without permission. The hacker immediately went into the Uniregistry account and turned off two-factor authentication. So when a login occurred, Tom, the owner of the domain name, would not be notified that somebody logged into the account. That's key. So here we have a name renewed till 2025. We have a Gmail account hacked. We have Uniregistry who, in talking to them, they admit and they know, and they told me and Tom that, looking at this case, they know that their account was accessed without permission. It was, a hacker got into it. Now, Uniregistry will not do anything and basically wipes their hands of the whole situation, because the Gmail account was hacked and not the Uniregistry account. That is kind of a concern to me, because Uniregistry knows that the account was accessed without permission, but they say that the Gmail account was hacked, so it's not their problem. Okay. Now, moving on. The hacker went into, and he deleted, or he or she deleted the domain from the Uniregistry account. Normally, in 99% of cases, somebody accesses an account, a registrar account. They will transfer the domain name to another account at the registrar, or which is their name, or they will transfer the domain out to another registrar. Now, in this case, that didn't happen. the domain was deleted from the account, then when it was deleted, Dropcatch, another registrar or a company, now they're associated with a registrar, but they're actually a company that buys domain names. They, not looking at the fact that it was renewed until 2025, which was, if they had done due diligence, they would have seen that this domain was renewed until 2025, and if there was an issue with that domain. Regardless, they ignored that, and they bought this essentially problematic, essentially stolen domain. They basically disregarded doing any due diligence. So they then took that essentially property that did not belong to them, and they sold it. They sold it to somebody else. So basically, if we put a real life situation to this, there's a car that was essentially used and abandoned on the side of the road. When somebody came along, Dropcatch, and said, hey, here's an abandoned car. This was sitting on the side of the road. They then grabbed the car and they sold it at auction to somebody else. Well, is it that even though the new person bought the name, isn't that car still does not belong to them, even though they bought it? The car does not, even though it was abandoned, Dropcatch bought the car and they sold it. They bought this vehicle and they didn't check to see it was registered till 2025 or registered to somebody else, right? They just grabbed it and sold it. So here we have Uniregistry who didn't, in my opinion, didn't do something right. They will not reclaim responsibility, even though they know the account was accessed without permission. That's Uniregistry and GoDaddy. Then Dropcatch comes in. They essentially, sell abandoned property that's not theirs after they have acquired it. So where are we at here? We're at now the fact that Tom really just needs the domain back for his business. So Tom, being the nice guy that he is, just needs it back. He buys, he then pays a lot of money for whatever the amount that the current registrant bought it from Dropcatch. So now we have Tom has his domain name back. We don't know whether or not, or Tom has decided whether or not he's going to go after Dropcatch for selling his stolen property or abandoned property, for going after Uniregistry because they clearly knew that it was accessed without permission, right? I'm glad to say that I think I've done my part to get Tom his domain name back. I'm going to leave it at that. We'll see what happens in the future with this. Now, you should be kind of concerned just as a domain name owner, because number one, your domain name can get accessed without permission. Number two, your registrar, if you're using certain registrars, they won't have your back if something bad happens. They don't care. They do not care. So there are certain registrars that do care and will have your back no matter what. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. We'll see what happens from now on. Now, there is an odd issue with DNS entries suddenly disappearing completely. So it's kind of random. This website owner, which happens to be the same website owner that I was working on, same website within links that I mentioned earlier. But frankly, he made a change to the domain's DNS, where the DNS was hosted, and went from Cloudflare to back to the registrar. And when that happened, he put all the entries in. And even though entries are in at the registrar properly, the name servers remain for the past several days. And even till right now, I checked before I recorded this, the name servers are completely blank. There's absolutely nothing there. They're just there's nothing in the name server, in the DNS entries. There's no the A record is blank, the MX record is blank, etc. That kind of means that basically the A record, like you have to, in the DNS entry, the A record has to show what IP address or what server where the website's at. And it's completely blank. If it's completely blank, then nothing will resolve. You can't, the website won't show up. It can't come up from anywhere. The same thing with email. There's no records there. They're just completely blank. That's just very odd, right? So regardless, the site can't resolve. It can't, it went from being up and running to basically by changing something, the DNS entries completely are just disappeared. And they can't even be populated. We've tried over and over again to actually put information in there and nothing will show up. It's completely blank. Don't know what's going on. We're still diagnosing the issue with multiple registrars and tech people working on it. It's the first time I've seen this. As you may recall, I have mentioned in the past, I'm working on kind of a personal project, which is related to email spam and coming in the inbox. And so anyway, I've used several different companies to test things and updates. SpamHero seems to be one of the best right now and something that I'm using. It's a fairly easy setup as long as you have access to your website's DNS. There's a few filters that you need to set up in cPanel if you're using that, because spammers will try to send you email directly to the server and bypassing all filters. And so that happens is you need to set something. So if somebody sends something directly to the server trying to bypass your spam filter, meaning that it's probably going to be spam, and those should be automatically discarded or not even allowed to happen. So anyway, so there's some spam getting through. It's pretty much 99 or let's say 90% effective. And rather than getting, let's say, 700 emails a day and spam emails, those are basically gone. And it's a time issue for me, is that having to go through so many emails, you just cannot keep up and so forth. So that said, SpamHero is my hero for this week. If you would like to get your company mentioned on the podcast or have me review, take a look at your tool or anything like that, let me know, get in touch. That said, this has been the Bill Hartzer Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast for July 14th, 2022. Thanks for joining me. I will talk to you again next week.